Welcome to the webinar. For those I haven't met, my name is Ian Mamengay. I'm the programming chair here for the Greater Kansas City HIMSS chapter. We've got some other board members on the line as well, including Brandy Myers, who will help a little bit with the Q&A at the end of the conversation today as well. But anyway, if you're not familiar with Greater Kansas City HIMSS chapter, want to get more involved, please reach out to anybody on this slide or myself included. Would love to have you involved in any way, or if you're interested in presenting a topic in the future as well, please reach out. Before we get going, I did want to send a thank you to our ambassador and executive sponsors for the chapter. So Nordic Consulting, Pure Storage, and 314E, not only for their help with this webinar, but really all the events throughout the year. So a big thank you to those groups again. Quick plug for our upcoming events. So this is not all of the events for the Greater Kansas City HIMSS chapter. There will be some other ones that get sprinkled in throughout, but we've got an in-person event on November 13th around AI and healthcare. We've got a couple virtual ones, one in December and one in January. We will do our annual State of Healthcare event, either January 23rd or 30th in person. We're targeting featuring Hal Wolf and some other local leaders on that again this year, similar to previous years' event. We're definitely going to do a social event at the HIMSS National Conference for anybody going. And then our May 9th, kind of end of the year annual fundraiser at the Boulevard is scheduled for May 9th. So anyway, just a plug for those events. We hope to see you at some of those, if not all of them, in the future. With that said, today's topic is health data and analytics strategies. Excited to have Jeff Fuller with us today. Jeff's on the line. He's got 27 years of healthcare experience. He's built solutions. He's led product strategy. He's been on the provider side a couple of times. All that to say, Jeff brings a wealth of knowledge on the topic. We're lucky to have him here today, and I'm excited to hear the presentation. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, and thank you again for joining.
All right, thanks, Ian. Let me get my slides going here. Okay, we good?
We see both slides, Jeff. We do see the presenter view right now, just a heads up.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
All good.
How's that?
Perfect. Thanks.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks very much for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this series. And in particular, I just wanted to give a shout out to all of the those that help coordinate and put on educational sessions for regional HIMSS events. I get to do these occasionally, and every time I do, it's really heartwarming to see all the curiosity and folks that are really looking to grow in their tech and analytics skills. And so with that in mind, I have been in healthcare my entire career, and I started as an operator. And my passion for data came, well, it's actually much by accident, but I like to think about my first job in healthcare that was a desk job where I had a cubicle with no computer in it. And just reflecting back on where we've come in the past couple of decades for the information that's available at our fingertips in order to do better, valuable healthcare. And when I got involved in data, it was simply because I had operational experience and knowledge, and they needed somebody to help just orchestrate the right people in the right seats to go with a EHR Go Live that included reporting and database administration. And that was about 15 years ago, and I haven't looked back since. And it's been a really great journey for innovating and how to provide healthcare in different communities, but especially the last couple of years in working with Divergent as a strategic advisor for a number of health systems. I've been able to encounter a lot of different approaches to how we prepare our organizations and the strategies that we use to maximize the value extracted from the data we have available to us. And through those learning lessons, I've been able to come up with some best practices, but also just some important strategic questions to ask yourselves as your organizations work to mature your capabilities in this area. So with that in mind, today I'm gonna cover a few different things, and I always like to think about the maturation of data and analytics is not really a tech problem. The tech is moving along at the pace tech is going to move along, but the people and the process opportunities is where the real meat of the opportunity lies. And as we think about health systems and providers and their role in the adoption of and the enablement of new technology, especially at the rapid pace in which it's introduced itself to our industry lately, my challenge to all organizations is to think about how do you orchestrate the right level of people empowerment and really the who and the how of analytics maturity, and that will enable the what to fall more naturally into strategic alignment for your organization. So I want to talk a little bit about that. AI is something that all organizations are wrestling with today, and I have some thoughts on what I've learned from other health systems and what I think we need to do to prepare the right path to effective AI. And then with that, change management is something that we think about in healthcare often, particularly as it relates to process improvement and quality improvement. But when it really comes to behavior change and enabling the front line with better tools to be better informed with how we're making decisions, there's some things around change management that I want to challenge for each of your organizations to rethink. And then a couple of examples just to give you something to take away. So to start with the problem, which is always important in anything you're doing in solutioning, you never want to start with the solution. Obviously, there are so many solutions inundating our inboxes today. A lot of great ideas, a lot of new entrants into our industry that think that they have the right solution to fix healthcare. But we know that the right perspective is to understand what is the context of the problem that we're trying to solve. And when it comes to the support of data and analytics for your organizations, the problem is simply defined to me as we have a limited number of bandwidth in our analytics resources or the supply of people that have access and skills and capabilities in order to extract value from data and build analytic solutions, faced with an unmet demand that is growing at a very rapid pace. And what's leading that charge is the complexity that we're having to deal with. There's a lot of data in the health industry. For instance, I've found some statistics that shows that I think we all know that we produce a lot of data in healthcare, but in fact, it's 30% of the world's data in electronic format comes from the healthcare industry. And Microsoft published recently a study from the World Economic Forum that evaluated that 97% of that data collected ends up going unused. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that when we're looking at transactions in healthcare that produce data, it often is centered around the EHR. It's centered around the transaction that's typically based on an encounter or an interaction that leads to documentation. And we know our EHR to be the center of a lot of things that we do in healthcare. And it's very important to make sure that EHR reflects the pathway for which our patients move through our systems. But as we're introducing new technologies and trying to innovate that rapidly, we find that there's all sorts of ancillary systems and data sources that are starting to inundate that data architecture. And so one of the big challenges that we have to face as an industry, just in general, is that our perspective on how to understand what the center of the data universe should be versus what it is today, that gap is a big step in understanding how do we build confidence and trust in the data itself. And a couple of aspects of that to do that effectively is to think about the people that have the ability to access that data, that are enabled with the right skill sets to be able to interact with it, and that we have transparency in what was the context for data as it's collected. As we start to collect data in more real time and understand that the context of how data is collected is not always a traditional interaction or the context of a visit like we're used to. We have to understand how to manage data in a way that's a little more progressive than we might be used to. So I've been able to do a few focus groups over the past year, and some of these comments you'll probably relate to, but in particular, I think that there's a frustration that has built to a level that really must be addressed. So I think that most of us are faced with stakeholders that are frustrated with having access to information they need to make effective decisions. But without the appropriate culture for adopting better data or governance to understand what the context of that data is and how we're prioritizing how to certify data in order to make it reusable, we have to address a lot of these problems, which, typically data and analytics has been seen as part of the technology support function for an organization. There are some innovative and forward-thinking organizations that have really put data and analytics more close to the front line as a strategic decision-making process, but typically it comes from some sort of request or mandate that needs to be complied with. So, if you're entering into, let's say, a value-based contract, and we're having to understand what are the metrics and measures we have to understand to succeed in that value-based contract, that becomes a mandate for, we have a timeline to organize data around this particular problem. And in order to do that well, we have to look at what's the trade-off going to be as far as managing data. And some of the things that comes out of that is inundation of redundant sources of information. So sometimes it makes sense to have multiple definitions for one metric for different business contexts. But typically when we see it happening in organizations, it's because there's shadow pockets of decision support and reporting and data analysis that's happening throughout the organization. And then naturally that kind of leads to you knowing who to call. Like there's ownership of insights that exist in every organization, and that knowledge that exists in the minds of those that have the most experience becomes the ones that are relied on more than others. And so if there's any two takeaways that I want you to walk away with from today's session, is these two simple facts. Data in our organizations is an asset. And by that, I mean that the knowledge capital that exists when you extract value from data is your competitive differentiator. It's the value of your organization. As technology progresses at a rapid pace in which applications and solutions and clinical transactions become basically data movement through a system and gets contextualized around problems that need to be solved in order to be more proactive in wellness, to think about risk mitigation, to think about preventing unnecessary events or unnecessary care, reducing cost or improving value. All of these things are built on an underlying idea that data is the fuel that moves all those things forward. And so if we don't treat it like an asset on the books that has monetary and clinical quality value, then we're not going to progress as quickly and as efficiently as we would like to. And then the second concept is everyone in your organization is a data analyst. And so this is my charge to help you change your mindset and how you think about every member of the team that needs to have information to do day-to-day and minute-to-minute decision-making more effectively. We will not succeed if we look at a data and analytics function as the primary arbiter of what is the context, what is the information to extract from this data, and rely on that limited resource to produce answers when really those data experts, the data scientists and engineers and solution builders in your data analytics functions, they need to be focused as much as they can on building the solutions that are reusable, that are at the front line, and make it easier for self-service enablement, so that the end user that's close to the patient becomes not only the person with the right information at their fingertips, but they become an analyst, and they can augment how they make decisions based on insights from the tools that those experts are building. So it's a little bit of a flip in thinking for how you basically look at the people or the staff that are responsible for bringing more value out of the data that you have. And this is a quote from HIMSS in their maturity model assessments that I work with often. They're built around this idea that you can't purchase this competency. It is an organizational trait. You have to think about the people involved and establish a culture and an environment where they are confident and the skills and the tools available to them to adopt and use analytics to the best of their ability. And so to dive a little bit deeper into the cultural aspects of analytics adoption, I wanted to start with just a few challenges just around that particular aspect. So strategic intent at the enterprise level, every organization is working towards short and long-term goals. Those long-term big rocks of the where we want to end up strategically as an organization needs to be the top point in which all things that you do align. And when it comes to technology solutions in general, we have this tendency to look at things as more of a support function. So tickets coming in to the system, you've got a ticket that tells you need to do something with this information, and it leads to this concept that you feel like you're serving the organization in a way that's really driven by different stakeholders, as opposed to coming together and thinking about what problems are we trying to solve, and how can we look across traditional organizational boundaries to rationalize what are the trade-offs that need to happen, or what can we expand in our thinking. If I need to have some sort of quality measure dashboard, what if that quality measure dashboard could also serve the purpose of like looking upstream for early indicators in a population health care management perspective to address proactive opportunities to build interventions or patient engagement to prevent downstream quality measures. So that sort of thinking can't happen if we're working in governance silos and we're working in a way that is much more tactical than strategic. And then the engagement is about the people's role in doing this well. When we have job roles that are not very consistently defined in how to tap into the potential of the technology at our fingertips, and if we have this mixed feelings about the advancement of technology, such as AI, then we're going to have a difficult time in compelling the hearts and minds of your clinicians in the front line to make innovative change happen effectively. And so in general, any solutioning that involves data needs to follow some sort of basic fundamental life cycle. And it always starts with defining the problem. And that's just simply asking the right questions. Your organization's faced with solutions all the time, but those solutions are often disconnected from the fit that needs to be apparent from the problem perspective in order to make it work well. And from that perspective, from that point, you move on to what is the certification of data assets that needs to support those problems, and how do we build the right solutions, and doing this in a way that enables rapidly building hypotheses. There's this concept of fail fast that's in advanced technology sectors in our lives. And those are how we get the things that delight us as consumers for anything we do with technology, because they've got a culture that's built around understanding what works and what doesn't work in a quicker way than we're used to in healthcare. And if we just think about asking these basic questions and understanding how to draw the connection with the ideal fit for a solution to a problem, then I think we're going to have a lot more effective innovations within our organizations. And with that in mind, I want to talk a bit about that everyone is an analyst concept to a greater degree. So this is just a visualization to show what my general experience has been with a number of health systems across the country, and that you've got some sort of analytics function, whether it's part of IT or part of strategy, or if it's centralized, and you've got within that function, maybe a couple of data scientists, maybe an engineer, maybe a solution architect. But those folks that are brought in to do analytics at a health system, they typically are not proactive in thinking, what is the operating model going to be in which this analytics function gets stuff done? And the default thinking is, again, well, they're a support function, right? So we need analytics. So we'll just start asking them to build us analytics. That creates a couple of things. It's dissatisfaction from a person perspective. So these folks are not able to work at the top of their license, to use a clinical term, if all they're doing is responding to, I need a dashboard, or I want to know, counts and characteristics of data that has already happened. Those are reporting functions that are being asked of the analytics team because of the problem. That's a symptom of the problem of not having good data governance, not having reusable data assets, and not following the correct maturity approach for data and analytics. You can't predict anything if you can't count it. And if your organization is struggling with being able to count or quantify performance from the past, then you're never going to move along that spectrum of advanced analytics. And then the other problem is general users, the population of consumers of the data product that your analytics team is producing. They're not getting consistency, and they're often not sure where to go to get the answers, because there's a lack of acknowledgement that, again, everyone is an analyst. And how to fix that is to transition from feeding the business the answers of the questions they're asking, to flipping that curve a little bit and thinking about teaching the business to fish. And so this just is a way to visually think about that aspect of creating, I call it communities of practice. Some people call it centers of excellence, or user groups, or special interest groups, whatever you end up calling it. My concept to encourage you all is to say, there are so many roles out in your organization that are filled by people that have interests in being more innovative, or having a lower barrier of entry to use data in their day-to-day work. There's a lot of people in the organization that might consider themselves analysts, but they are not treated as such because they're in the business as opposed to in the technology organization. And so in order to build that confidence and break down some of those barriers, it's really helpful to invest the time and effort to provide the right tools, the right training, and the right access to data, so that those folks in the analytics community that are embedded in their units and they're curious about data, empower them with the right information so that they can do more with the data that's available. And that frees up the people in the analytics group to work more directly and more efficiently towards building solutions that are reusable. And the overall result is you're going to accelerate the amount of time it takes to get to the value of the data that you have available. It seems like a lot of work, and it is not that's not the case. I would just say that it's different work than what you might anticipate an analytics and a data team to be working on. And so when putting that to practice on a day-to-day basis, my encouragement is to start small, start with an area in operations or administration that's not typically heavy on clinical, unless it's something that's well-defined, like clinical quality measures or value-based care measures, and assemble a team of just different stakeholders around the table that can help provide the context of the knowledge that's needed to do effective work around the data that's needed to be reusable. Okay, so now we're going to pivot to AI. I want to make sure if there are any questions that are coming in, I'm happy to take those as they come. Please put them in the Q&A box, or Brandy can interrupt me and I can take any of those questions if there's something that is piquing your interest as we're moving along here. Okay, so AI is a topic on the front of everyone's mind in healthcare. What we're thinking about in AI is typically the downside, the scary bits of it, where we're thinking of the risks of either cyber threats and transparency and private information, or the ever increasing anxiety that is the AI will take my job one day. And so my take on that is that it's inevitable. The organizations that are not addressing proactively what AI means for our organization is probably going to be behind at this point. And my encouragement is to say that there is a lot of things that we used to do in healthcare that we don't do anymore, and for very good reason. And that will be the case with AI in the future. There'll be a lot of things that we won't do anymore. And it's not because we're looking to replace people. It's because we've got technology that can help us do it better. And so I always like to say that the clinician or the coder or the radiologist or whoever it is, the stakeholder in the health system that is using AI will replace those that are not using AI, as opposed to my job's going to be eliminated. And so some of the best practices I've seen in talking to different organizations is to generate some excitement around AI that's in a positive framework, and establish a little bit of definitions or a language around AI that demystifies it a bit. And obviously asking your organization the questions it needs to answer in order to talk about what's important to prepare for AI is also important. AI has to be managed in a different way than any other technology. To make it easier for executives to understand, sometimes I talk about AI as a human resources investment. You're certainly investing in technology that can help make everyone's jobs easier, but it's an entity that also could be on the balance sheet of HR, because it's augmenting workflow or steps in a process that is typically done by a person. And especially from an administrative perspective, I think we all would benefit from a solution that would help us understand how do we free up the things we do on a day-to-day basis that can be automated to do more value-added, special, innovative types of thinking. And so some of these questions and how we think about the spectrum of what AI is potentially doing in any given workflow will help us to frame how we govern those AI solutions. And the potential is broad. Here's a couple of just categories for where AI is currently being deployed and thought about as a value add. Of course, better patient outcomes is something that's very important. I would argue that AI is not ready for this generally, but that doesn't mean that we're not able to set the stage for how it can be effective in the future. A lot of the administrative system efficiency types of examples are the ones where most organizations are starting. And I think that's the right move to make because there is a lot of fear and unknowns about how to use AI effectively. And so this just helps us gather some confidence and some trust behind how AI can be managed and be used in our organization. So a lot of people are doing ambient documentation pilots. This is a good way to recognize that AI is more of a guide or a support function that can enhance something that was time consuming before, that can be done more efficiently and quickly with the help of the added brain power of an AI solution. And then these 5 categories of waste from the IHI study are always something in healthcare that we need to be relentlessly focused on improving. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity to do leaps and bounds more of reducing this waste than ever before when we think about it from an AI perspective. And so some of the use cases that I've seen and I think that are very interesting, I've talked about coding and documentation, but there's some other ones as well. So if we were to categorize it in the context of those that are consumer facing versus those that are stakeholder or end user facing, I think the consumer facing ones have a long way to go before it's going to be effective to deal with the complexities of a patient or consumer journey through health systems. However, the one that I call out here is one that I wanted to help use as an example to help you understand the different perspective that is beneficial to take when we're thinking about AI. So we all are thinking about how to maximize the resources available to us, especially in an acute care setting. I think most of us are in our organizations have capacity planning functions or those functions within an acute care setting that's always trying to get ahead of what's coming and what's the supply and demand of our bed resources, our staff resources. If you have a command center for capacity planning, you're typically looking at things like what's the average turnaround time for a bed, what's the average impact of census going in and out of the acute care setting. What are we expecting as far as increases in demand from either pandemics or increased elective surgeries, all those sorts of things. But when we think about AI as a solution to untangle some of the spaghetti model of the hospital capacity opportunity, then you start to quickly realize that that's small thinking, it's limited thinking. Even though capacity planning in an acute care setting feels like a huge problem to tackle, if you were to expand your perspective to think about potential patients at home that might become inpatient acute in an acute setting at some point, and then those that have already gone home, then you start to reorient your perspective from the bed itself to the health consumer or the potential health consumer. And then you can start to understand the correlation between, let's say, subspecialty scheduling slots in an ambulatory setting and its impact on discharge planning for those that need to go through acute. So the leap from one to the other is not one we can often make because we know conceptually that it's related, but there's no way to really connect those dots until you think about it from a data perspective, all those data points that are around for understanding the demand on patient appointments in a certain clinic to the demand on the OR for an elective surgery, to home care and the transitions of care that happen there. You can start to understand all the different levers you have to adjust in order to optimize that to a greater degree. And AI is built for these types of problems. AI is not the right solution for every problem, but when you have data that is very complicated and it's hard to make sense of, there are huge innovations that can be made by solutioning around that sort of perspective. Okay, so I've hit on some of these, so I'm gonna kind of breeze through this a little bit, but when we look at all of these risks, there are certainly things that need to be dealt with. My best approach for all of this is to establish as early as possible, if you don't already have it, some sort of governance body that includes a wide array of different stakeholders to prepare for all of these things. First, though, I would say inventory the governance that's in place today, because you're probably going to have some governance structures that exist in your organization that can be consolidated or eliminated in order to get to a point where some of these things can be improved if we're bringing together different concepts. So it doesn't have to be, just AI governance. It could be an analytics or solutions governance, or however you want to call it. But these sorts of challenges can be addressed through governance. The other thing that it helps you understand is all the different codependencies that exist across solutions, technology or not. I think that one of the things that we're seeing is that every AI solution, every tech solution or application, it's no longer just a technology solution that has to be managed as far as access and server space and downtime and all those different technology things, but it's also behavior change, adoption, process improvement, job optimization, and patient-centered coordination. All these things require the need for having clinicians, having legal and risk management, former patients and families at the table to be a part of your governance structure. And the reason for that is the data problem in healthcare is becoming incredibly complex. And so I've said a lot about like the end result of good change management and the cultural changes and adoption needs. But the reality is the data itself is interacting in ways beyond our imaginations from just a few years ago, especially as the business model of healthcare changes so rapidly. There's competing interests that are new entrants to the healthcare industry that are relying on new and unique data sources in order to have a competitive advantage for things like primary and on-demand care. When we think about the fact that the future of healthcare is going to be oriented around what's most important to a patient, it's going to be that all the information about my health is in my pocket, that having to go to the doctor is probably a last resort from other things that can be done by not going to the doctor, and that I'm no longer going to tolerate having to provide the same information over and over again to my insurance company, to my primary care provider, to my specialty clinic or urgent care. And so all of that data pipes that exist underneath that has to do with the business concepts of what roles do each of these types of organizations play, because they typically compete against each other to work against each other. But more and more, my optimism is that they're coming together to do business around a patient-centered approach that adds value and improves just the efficiency of how health is achieved. And it all starts with data governance. This is my plug for data governance. I could do a whole conversation just about data governance, but all I'll say now is that if you're not looking at data governance as a worthwhile investment, then we can talk after this webinar, because I certainly want to encourage all your organizations to have a framework where new data sources and important data sources can be made reusable and trusted and transparent, well-defined, and documented in a way that is not only going to support AI and other advanced modeling, but it creates strategic value, and that you're getting your entire organization speaking the same language on the same page, and also empowered with effective data. Okay, and then the last challenge that we talked about was change management. So there's a lot of words here, but this is just like a typical organizational change management approach. We tend to think about change management as a management science that takes a balanced approach to all the different things that need to be assessed and prepared for any change, no matter if it's tech-based or not. And it relies heavily on communication, training, transparency, closed loop feedback, so that the change can be catered to meet different challenges and risks. And these are all well and good and important things, and your organizations probably have their own frameworks for how do you roll out new changes. But when it comes to advanced analytics or AI or new technologies, these are three aspects of traditional OCM that I think are important to pay attention to. So I've talked a little bit about the first one, but it's just simply to say that your IT organization is no longer a support function. If it's being treated by performance metrics that looks like how fast you respond to service requests, but it doesn't have any sort of performance measure around the quality of care or strategic improvement that's gained from technology investments, then that needs to change in your organization. Service requests and responding to those needs and managing risks and downtime and all that is very important. But in order for IT and analytics functions to be prepared for the future of how health is delivered, you also need to be at the table for strategic decisions and be able to connect the dots with these tech investments are helping us achieve X, and X being the most important strategic goals for your organization. And that just means flipping the idea around from new solutions are not going to be put in as as an ask or a request. It's going to be put in as a problem or a need. And let the technology experts and those that are closest to what's available from an AI perspective make the best fit decision on what sorts of solutions would help fulfill those needs or solve those problems. And that's important to do because it also breaks down those silos that we talked about before, which is you're going to find that the solutions to fix the problems that you have are not typically going to be constrained and those organizational barriers that we're used to. It's going to break down some of those silos, like the capacity management example. How AI is perceived in your organization, I've talked a bit about that, but from a change management perspective, you have to understand that the end user that is enabled with an AI solution has agency in how that AI works. AI, again, if you treat it like a human resource investment, it's going to learn and be trained by how it's used. And it's an important piece of the communication and training that needs to go into solutioning with AI, because you don't want it to be a black box, like just give me an answer. You want end users to participate in how the AI gets trained to be effective in the environment that it's working in. And that's a whole different level of thinking and new muscles to flex for how organizational decision-making happens in general. So a lot to think about there. And again, we could probably do another hour just on that. But to put it all together with just another couple of examples, and I'll go through these a little bit efficiently so that there's time for questions. But one of the things that I like to pose as far as thinking outside the box is just the patient's perspective. And I'm constantly challenging the concept of, let's say, like the value equation in healthcare. Cost quality over quality equaling value is not something that patients ever think about. But what they do think about is I'm living my life and occasionally it's disrupted by some sort of healthcare need. And what I want is to have an easy way to access the care that I need, that's convenient, and that it's informative, that I'm informed on my options, and that there's a way to be able to feel like I'm being served as a person who has a relationship at any point in my life that's needed with the health system that I belong to. And one way to do that from an AI perspective is to think about patient engagement differently. So this is just a summary of a study that I did where I looked at some patient engagement solutioning at 38 different health systems over a period of time, just before the pandemic, where the whole concept was to think about patients discharging from an acute care setting to the home. And so that transition is often fraught with a lot of different logistics and emotions and fears and risks that we understand is the seed for which what happens after that is planted, and that the ultimate goal is to make sure that they are comfortable and not getting to a place where they could potentially be readmitted in an avoidable readmission. And so the study here, or the concept, was just simply to do a text message within 24 hours to patients that were discharged home, and ask them a few standard questions. And the way we asked the questions were the same, but the answers to the question through AI led to different decision trees. So the question of, do you feel better or worse than when you were in the hospital, is an important question to start the process of customized care management for these patients. It could be as easy as just plugging in a care manager when they say worse, and then having that care manager take the ball from there and do some work to help understand why and maybe solve that problem. Or it could be even more AI-based and intelligent decision tree making that's learning over time, what do they really need? And oftentimes it's things like just, I didn't understand my discharge instructions because I wasn't really listening. I didn't know, what I was supposed to do as far as a diet, or how to manage going to sleep, and all these different things that are pretty typical. And what we found is that for these million patients in this study, the readmissions for this population went down by 26% for the subset that felt worse. This is not the whole readmission reduction. This is just those that said they felt worse, reduced from 16.8% readmission rate to 12.4% readmission rate in 30 days post-discharge. And that's just because we answered their questions and their concerns that would have typically led them to maybe go to the emergency department on a Friday night. And those, we know, are opportunities to intervene and fix things. And there's also things that were specific around follow-up appointments or medications or discharge instructions. All of these are low-hanging fruit, really, to understand how to capture. So from an AI perspective, generative AI could be very helpful in this use case to respond to these patient needs in a way that feels personal, but personal at scale for a health system to impact readmissions. And then the second example is I'm starting with this just concept of product mindset and analytic solution building. So there's a lot of really great examples that I'd love to share with anybody that's interested. If you just get in touch with me on how to define solution architecture, or just the role of those people in your organization that orchestrate solutions to solve problems. And there's a lot of lines and complexities here. This is just one example of many where they're kind of combining the idea of rapid cycle testing with a change management approach. But if you have the ability to conceptualize potential solutions within your organization that can solve problems that can't be bought off the shelf, that there's not really a point solution out there that can be licensed in order to serve these needs, you need to build something. How you define that problem and move along the life cycle of developing the solution is very important. And what you end up with is things like this, an example of all the different technology functions that might lead to high-level strategic goals. So if you're trying to excel clinically as a strategic initiative, well, what does that mean? And you can kind of visualize that all the solutions and data and people that are involved in innovating on the right ideas to prioritize in order to achieve those transformations in your healthcare system. It can become a lot, very detailed, but if you look at it from a perspective of learning how to crawl before you walk and before you run, each of these bubbles might include very simple solutions that could evolve to more complex solutions over time. But ultimately, it's all about speeding up the time to value for improving your strategic needs. And so one way that I was able to do that at a couple of different health systems from a cost of care opportunity was using AI to build models that looks at patient populations in a different way than traditional like EHR data that's typically categorized by coding or billing data. What that misses as far as impactable cost savings opportunities is what are the taxonomies that help put apples to apples together when comparing different populations that have different outcomes from a cost perspective, and then working with clinicians on the front line to do studies around what are the things that are invested in this patient population that has led to higher costs than expected, and how can we reduce those? And it's a complex problem, to be clear, but the solution is almost always lots of little mini improvements. There is no multi-million-dollar cost savings opportunity for a health system with one initiative. It tends to be hundreds of smaller initiatives. And so my solution is that AI helps to, again, take a very complex picture and make it end user friendly, so that you can look at the infinite number of opportunities that are there to improve and optimize waste and your cost of care to something that is potentially impactful, and that allows clinicians to see a simpler view of this is something that shouldn't cost as much as it does. And there are some standardizations that we can put in this care pathway that will reduce some waste, and then monitor it over time. Okay, and so with that, I like Dr. Topol reinforcing my concept about data as an asset. And these are just the considerations in summary of what I've covered today, just as a reminder. Governance, culture, change management, data governance, and new concepts, and enabling the frontline of users to be able to serve themselves more effectively by freeing up technology resources to build repeatable solutions in order to allow more people access to reliable, trustworthy information to make better decisions. So with that, I'm going to pause for a second and see if there are any questions. And this is my contact information, and I very much would love to continue the conversation with anyone that's interested on any of these concepts. It was really a flyover, and I can go deep into any of those concepts as needed, but just wanted to say thank you very much and see if there's any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And please put the questions in the Q&A portion here, and we'll take a peek here in a second. But a big thanks to you, Jeff, for presenting today. Great topic. I think it's, speak for many, it's near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, including my own. Also, big thank you to everybody that joined here today as well. As I mentioned before, we hope to see you at an upcoming HIMSS event as well. It doesn't look like I see any questions yet. So one thing I'll just mention again is this webinar was recorded. So if you want to go back and reference this, we will be posting it on the Greater Kansas City HIMSS website, and you can also share with colleagues there. So let me just take one last look and see if we've got any questions.
Oh, while people are figuring out where that Q&A button is, it's on the bottom middle of your screen. Also, another option is you can raise your hand. There should be a raise hand option as well, and we can take you off mute to ask your question if you'd prefer to do it verbally. So give everyone a couple of minutes there. Okay, Jeff, we had a question.
Okay.
Nan, did you have a question? Do you want to chat?
I'm sorry, I did not. Thank you for the presentation.
You bet. Okay, well, I did not answer all the questions in the presentation by any means. But like I said, my email address is here. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to continue the conversation, take questions afterwards as well.
That sounds good. I don't see anything else out there, so I think we'll land right here today. But thank you all again for joining. Thank you so much, Jeff, for presenting, and I hope you all have a great afternoon. Take care, everybody.